Hey guys, Uncommon Ramen here. Before I get into the video, let me remind you, if you like the content, please hit that like and subscribe button. And if you'd like to see the content as it drops, hit the bell icon so you get some notifications. Also, if you feel the need to support me, hit me up on my Patreon at patreon.com/uncommonramen, capital U, capital R. I do all of this in my free time, so any amount of support can help me bring more of this content to you more often. So today for TCG Tuesday, we're going to be taking a look at another precon that I updated, Yidris Maelstrom Wielder. As a little backstory on this guy, me and my play group had started playing Commander probably around 2018. And we had decided as a group that we were going to stick with pre-constructed Commander because at that particular point in time, I had significantly more experience with Magic and deck building in Magic than anybody else in the group, and I think that we were all kind of collectively afraid of the gap between what decks I would build versus what decks they would build. So we were collecting different commander decks here and there, and this is one of the ones that I picked up that I absolutely fell in love with. It's still one of my favorite precons to this day. It's just a downright powerful card, and Yidris would make you think it is something that it isn't. So really quickly, Yidris is blue, black, red, and green. It is a 5/4 trample, and whenever Yidris Maelstrom Wielder deals combat damage to a player, as you cast spells from your hand this turn, they gain Cascade. So you would think that this deck would be kind of a Cascade-centric deck, but the precon for this deck was actually more of a light wheel strategy, using cards like Windfall, Wheel of Fate, and the Miracle Wheel, plus cards like Waste Not to try and maximize off of opponents discarding cards and drawing cards. So when I decided that I wanted to upgrade this, I decided that I was going to upgrade it keeping the spirit of what made me fall in love with it in the first place, which was the whole wheels idea. So this deck is going to be a Yidris Wheels deck with a lot of punishing cards for anybody who has to discard, or any opponent that has to discard a card or draw a card. So let's just jump in. We're going to take a look at the creatures first. Okay. Starting with Archfiend of Ifnir. It is a 3 and 2 black, 5/4 flying. Whenever you cycle or discard another card, put a -1/-1 counter on each creature your opponent controls. So this fits right into the theme of cycling a lot of cards. This helps you clear the board as you cycle, not cycling, my bad, discarding cards. It helps you clear the board as you start discarding cards, and since we're wheeling as often as we can, we're going to be discarding our cards over and over again, so hopefully you can clear the board relatively quickly. The -1/-1 counters also get around indestructible, and because it is to each creature your opponent controls, it also gets around Shroud and Hexproof because it's not targeting them. So it's just a really fantastic card in this deck. Next we have Averna Chaos Bloom, so that we can get a little bit of extra value out of these cascades. When you're cascading with Averna, as you cascade, you may put a land card from among the exiled cards onto the battlefield tapped, so you kind of ramp a little bit, and this deck definitely could use the ramp. This is green, blue, red for a 4/2. Next up we have Bone Miser. Bone Miser is the opposite of Waste Not. So where Waste Not looked for cards your opponent discards, Bone Miser looks for cards that you discard. And this is really beneficial because now you can benefit from both sides discarding and drawing cards. Bone Miser is 5 for a 4/4. Whenever you discard a creature card, put a 2/2 black zombie creature token onto the battlefield. Whenever you discard a land card, add 2 black mana, and whenever you discard a non-creature, non-land card, draw a card. Next we have Consuming Aberration, 3, a blue and a black, star. Consuming Aberration's power and toughness are each equal to the number of cards in your opponent's graveyards. Whenever you cast a spell, each opponent reveals the top card of his or her library until he or she reveals a land card and puts those cards into his or her graveyard. So the beauty of this thing is that it gets massive as the game goes on. It has its own triggered mill effect, and it just heavily benefits from wheels. So while it's not a mill deck, it definitely has fun stuff to help keep your opponent's decks thin. Next we have Dragon Mage, 5 and 2 red, 5/5 flying. Whenever Dragon Mage deals combat damage to a player, each player discards his or her hand and then draws 7 cards. So it's a flying wheel, and it is just, you can't not have this. It's incredible. Next we have Fate Unraveler, 3 and a black, 3/4. Whenever an opponent draws a card, Fate Unraveler deals 1 damage to that player. So again, we're trying to punish our opponents for drawing cards and discarding cards. Typically speaking, if you don't have some way to punish them and all you are doing is wheeling them, then really you're kind of giving them some sort of advantage because they get to draw through their deck. So having anything in here that can do incremental damage for drawing cards and so on and so forth is just really well. Next up, we have Jace's Archivist. This is 1 and 2 blue. You can, for a 2/2, you can tap a blue and Jace's Archivist. Each player discards his or her hand, then draws cards equal to the greatest number of cards a player discarded this way. So this is a windfall on legs. Next, we have Kydel, Chosen of Krufix. 2, a green and a blue. Tap, add 1 colorless mana to your mana pool for each card you've drawn this turn, and it has partner, not that the partner matters. This is really good in this deck very specifically because you're going to be drawing a ton of cards, hopefully every turn. Lizard Blades. This is 1 and a red for a 1/1 double strike. Equipped creature has double strike. Reconfigure for 2. So this is in here with quite a few other pieces of equipment that are supposed to allow Yidris to actually make connection to a player, so that we can actually take advantage of the Cascade mechanic. Now, this is in there with things like Whisper Silk Cloak and Aqueous Form. Obviously, those are probably the better of the two, but giving it double strike isn't bad. Next we have Maelstrom Wanderer, 5, a blue, a red, and a green for a 7/5. Creatures you control have haste, and then Cascade. So the haste is incredibly good in this deck. The 7/5 body is incredibly good, and the double Cascade is really great. You're bound to run into at least 1 wheel while you Cascade, and again, since we just want to keep wheeling our opponents and really keep them on the ropes, this is a fantastic card in here. Next we have Magus of the Wheel. This is 2 and a red, 3/3. If you tap 1 and a red and Magus of the Wheel and then sacrifice Magus of the Wheel, each player discards their hand and draws 7 cards. So it's another Wheel of Fortune on legs. Nath of the Gilt Leaf. This is 3, a black, and a green for a 4/4. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may have target opponent discard a card at random. Whenever an opponent discards a card, you may create a 1/1 green elf warrior creature token. So this is phenomenal because then we can also maximize off the idea of creating a ton of tokens, not just with Nath, but with Waste Knot and Bone Miser, and try to swing wide for another fantastic strategy on top of all of this. Next we have Nekazar the Mindrazor. This is 2 blue, black, red. It's a 2/4. At the beginning of each player's draw step, that player draws an additional card, and whenever an opponent draws a card, Nekazar the Mindrazor deals 1 damage to that player. So again, we're just going to punish you for drawing cards. Next we have Niv-Mizzet the Firemind. This guy is 2 blue, and 2 red. Flying 4/4. Whenever you draw a card, Niv-Mizzet the Firemind deals 1 damage to any target. And draw a card. Tap him to draw a card. This is also incredibly good because now not only are you getting punished for drawing cards on your turn, or just drawing cards in general, but now you're getting punished whenever I draw cards as well. Next we have Psychosis Crawler. 5 for a star. Psychosis Crawler's power and toughness are each equal to the number of cards in your hand. Whenever you draw a card, each opponent loses 1 life. So another version of whenever I draw a card, you lose life. And more importantly, something that's something that I actually had a question about that I had to look up. Wheel effects will fully resolve before Psychosis Crawler checks to see what his power and toughness is. So when you cast a wheel or windfall, whatever it is, you discard your hand and you draw back up. Then Psychosis Crawler will check to see what his power and toughness is. Next up, we have Runehorn Hellkite. This is 5 and a red. It's a 5/5 flying. For 5 and a red, you can exile Runehorn Hellkite from your graveyard, and each player will discard their hand and draw 7 cards, so another wheel effect. Next we have Sangromancer. This is 2 and 2 black, flying 3/3. Whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, you gain 3 life, and whenever your opponent discards a card, you gain 3 life. Sorry. So we already have things that punish them by dealing damage or by creating tokens and so on and so forth, but now whenever they discard a card, you're also going to gain 3 life for every card discarded. So we're also going to bolster up our life total, and at some point in time, all of this is just going to converge into a very hard to deal with engine. Next we got Turgid, God of Fright. This is 3 and 2 black for a 4/5 menace. Whenever an opponent sacrifices a non-token permanent or discards a permanent card, you may put that card from your graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. So there is another side to this card, but we don't play it for that side. Obviously, what we're doing here is we're forcing our opponent to discard cards, and then any permanent cards that they discard, we get to put into play on our side, and it just gets out of hand. And it's part of the reason why Turgid is so vehemently hated. Next we have Locust God. This guy is 4, a blue, and a red for a 4/4 flying. Whenever you draw a card, create a 1/1 blue and red insect creature token with flying and haste. For 2, a red, and a blue, you get to draw a card and discard a card, and when Locust God dies, return it to its owner's hand at the beginning of next end step. So again, the beauty of this is to create a whole bunch of tokens as you're drawing cards and just really swing wide on your opponent, if necessary. Then lastly, we have Xyrus, the Writhing Storm. This is 2, a green, a blue, and a red. For a 3/5 flying, whenever an opponent draws a card, except for the first one they draw in each of their draw steps, create a 1/1 green snake creature token, and then when Xyrus, the Writhing Storm, deals combat damage to a player, you and that player each draw that many cards. So we have an engine here that continuously creates snakes, and then with the wheels we'll continuously create a whole bunch more snakes. So again, another token strategy. Next up, we're going to take a look at the instants. I was actually kind of surprised at how few instants there are in here by comparison to sorceries, but there's still quite a few instants here. We have Ancient Excavation. This is 2, a black, and a blue. Draw cards equal to the number of cards in your hand, then discard a card for each card drawn this way, and then has basic land cycling. Then we got Beast Within, 2 and a green. Destroy target permanent. Its controller gets a 3/3 beast creature token. Got Brainstorm, 1 blue. Draw 3 cards, then put 2 cards from your hand on top of your library in any order. We got Chaos Warp, 2 and a red. The owner of target permanent shuffles it into his or her library, then reveals the top card of his or her library. If it's a permanent card, he or she puts that onto the battlefield. Then we got Curtain's Call. This is 5 and a black. Undaunted. This spell costs 1 less for each opponent. Destroy 2 target creatures. Then we got Evacuation. 3 and 2 blue. Return all creatures to their owner's hands. And then we got Wheel and Deal. This is 3 and a blue, any number of target opponents. Each discards his or her hand and draws 7 cards, and then I get to draw a card. So I love this one because this one is very ally friendly. If for whatever reason you find yourself in a position of making deals with certain players, Wheel and Deal can avoid them completely. The other part about this is that Wheel and Deal doesn't target you, so you don't end up having to discard and draw, and you can force any number of opponents to discard and draw. So I really enjoy this card. Next up, we're going to take a look at Sorceries. There are a few Sorceries, and by that I mean there's a lot of Sorceries. Alright, starting with Ancestral Vision. Ancestral Vision is a 1 blue to suspend with 4. Once all the suspend counters are gone, you cast it to draw 3 cards, or have target player draw 3 cards. So if it comes to an opportunity to kill an opponent by making them deck out, this could help. Next we got Cultivate. 2 and a green, search your library for up to 2 basic land cards, reveal those cards, put one onto the battlefield tapped and the other into your hand, and then shuffle. Next we have Dark Deal. This is a black wheel, 2 and a black. Each player discards all cards in his or her hand, then draws that many cards -1. So it's not my favorite wheel, but it's still wheels. Then we have Farseek. 1 and a green, search your library for a plains, island, swamp, or mountain card. Put that card onto the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle your library. Got Far Wanderings. 2 and a green, search your library for a basic land card. Put that card onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library. If you have Threshold, which basically is having 7 or more cards in your graveyard, instead search your library for up to 3 basic land cards. Put them onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library. This is really a finicky card. If you draw this in the early game, you could be holding on to it for quite some time, so it acts like a dead card. But as the game goes on, especially as you're wheeling, this card can be a phenomenal addition to your ramp suite. Next we have Incendiary Command. This is a sneaky little wheel. For 3 and 2 red, you can choose 2 options. Incendiary Command deals 4 damage to target player, or Incendiary Command deals 2 damage to each creature, or destroy target non-basic land, or each player discards all the cards in his or her hand, then draws that many cards. Next up we have Kodama's Reach. 2 and a green, search your library for up to 2 basic land cards, reveal those cards, put one onto the battlefield tapped and the other into your hand, then shuffle your library. Molten Psyche. 1 and 2 red, each player shuffles each player shuffles the cards from his or her hand into his or her library, then draws that many cards. If you have Metalcraft, so having 3 or more artifacts, Molten Psyche deals damage to each opponent equal to the number of cards that player has drawn this turn. So this is a very interesting card. First off, it has a slight wheel effect. It's not the same kind of wheel effect where you get discard triggers, but its Metalcraft is where it gets really interesting. If you've wheeled a couple of times during this turn and then you play Molten Psyche afterward, while it has Metalcraft, Molten Psyche can actually deal a ridiculous amount of damage to each player. And so that is where Molten Psyche has its extreme upside versus its downside being that you don't discard cards. Next up, we have Past in Flames. 3 and a red. Each instant and sorcery card in your graveyard gains flashback until end of turn. The flashback cost is equal to its mana cost. This card also has a flashback of 4 and a red. Past in Flames is super, super good. In this deck, having the wheels in your graveyard and them having flashback kind of can shut out a game. This deck can work very, very quickly. And also on the other side of it, it can also just flop really badly. Next we have Profane Tutor. Suspends for 2. It is suspends for 1 and a black. Suspends with 2 counters on it for 1 and a black. And once it's finished with its time counters, you can search your library for a card, put that card into your hand, then shuffle. Reforge the Soul. This is 3 and 2 red. Each player discards his or her hand and draws 7 cards. It has Miracle, 1, and a red, so if it is the card that you draw at the beginning of your turn, you just make sure you may cast this card for its Miracle cost when you draw it, if it's the first card you drew this turn. Yeah, so if it's the first card you draw during your turn, you can actually cast it for 1 and a red, which is the normal cost of Wheel of Fortune, as opposed to 3 and 2 red. Next we have Spell Twine. This is 5 and a blue. Exile target instant or sorcery card from your graveyard, and target instant or sorcery card from an opponent's graveyard. Copy those cards, cast the copies if able without paying their mana cost, exile Spell Twine. So this is interesting because not only can we just outright reanimate one of our instants or sorceries, probably a wheel, but you can do it to your opponents as well. And with the number of wheels that have probably happened by the time you actually cast the spell, there's any numerous amount of options in their graveyards that will be kind of disgusting. Next up we have Treasure Cruise. Has Delve, 7 and a blue, draw 3 cards. In this deck, it's not hard to delve this into play for a blue. Then we have Wheel of Fate. This guy is the Suspend Wheel of Fortune. So for 1 and a red, you suspend it with 4 counters. When the 4 counters are gone, each player discards his or her hand, then draws 7 cards. We got Wheel of Misfortune. This is 2 and a red. Each player secretly chooses a number 0 or greater. Then all players reveal those numbers simultaneously and determine the highest and lowest numbers revealed this way. Wheel of Misfortune deals damage equal to the highest number to each player who chose that number. And each player who didn't choose the lowest number discards their hand and draws 7 new cards. So this can be a really potentially fun card. First off, you get to deal damage to whoever chose the highest number, which could end up being you. Just keep that in mind. And then you wheel everybody except for the person who chose the lowest number, which also could end up being you. So I think this is a really interesting wheel effect, and for 2 and a red, it's very close to Wheel of Fortune. Next up, we have Whispering Madness. This is 2, a blue, and a black. Each player discards his or her hand, then draws cards equal to the greatest number of cards cards a player discarded this way, and then has Cipher. So this acts like a Windfall, except the Cipher ability has it attached to a creature, and anytime that creature deals combat damage to a player, you can cast a copy of Whispering Madness without paying its mana cost. So you can just continuously wheel after you've ciphered it. And then finally, we have Windfall, 2 and a blue. Each player discards his or her hand, then draws cards equal to the greatest number of cards a player discarded this way. This is pretty much along with the Wheel of basically Fate and Misfortune, kind of a staple for this kind of a deck. All right, next we're going to take a look at artifacts. There we go. Starting with an Arcane Signet, it is 2. You can tap it for your commander's color identity. Chromatic Lantern costs 3. Lands you control have tap to add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool, and then you can also tap the Chromatic Lantern to add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. You got Commander's Sphere. This is 3. You can tap it to add mana to your mana pool. Add 1 mana to your mana pool of your commander's color identity. And you can also sacrifice it to draw a card. Sorry about that, guys. Then we got Fellwar Stone. This is 2. You can tap it to add a mana to your mana pool of a color that a land your opponents control could produce. We got Lightning Greaves. 2 for an equipment. Equipped creature has Haste and Shroud and equips for 0. We got Rakdos Signet. 2, and you can tap 1 and Rakdos Signet to add a black or red to your mana pool. That's Simic Signet, same thing, except you can add a green or blue. We have Soul Ring, 1 to tap for 2 colorless. We got Swiftfoot Boots. This one is 2. The equipped creature has Hexproof and Haste and equips for 1. We got Teferi's Puzzle Box. This is 4. At the beginning of each player's draw step, that player puts the cards in his or her hand on the bottom of his or her library in any order, and then draws that many cards. So a lot like Molten Psyche, we're not getting discard triggers, but we are getting draw card triggers. And then last but not least, we got Whisper Silk Cloak. Another equipment for 3. Equipped creature can't be blocked and has Shroud, and 2 to equip. Next, we're going to take a look at enchantments. Starting with Aqueous Form. Aqueous Form says enchanted creature has or can't be blocked, and whenever enchanted creature attacks, scry 1. Next, we have Burgeoning. Burgeoning is 1 green. Whenever an opponent plays a land, you may put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield. Typically speaking, this is one of these cards that you want to have in the early game, because the later the game goes, the less you're going to be able to use this ability in a typical game. But because we are continuously wheeling and drawing new hands of cards, Burgeoning in this deck will have a lasting effect, because you should almost certainly, through the course of each wheel, have at least 1 or 2 extra lands sitting in your hand. Next, we have Liliana's Caress. 1 and a black. Whenever an opponent discards a card, that player loses 2 life. So we're again punishing our opponents for discarding cards. Then we have Megrim. It's the same thing as Liliana's Caress, except it costs 1 more. So 2 and a black. Whenever an opponent discards a card from their hand, Megrim deals 2 damage to that player. Then we have Raider's Wake. It's the same thing as Megrim, except it costs 1 more, and it has Raid. So whenever an opponent discards a card, that player loses 2 life. And then Raid at the beginning of your end step. If you attacked with a creature this turn, target opponent discards a card. Next up, we have Underworld Breach. This is 1 in a red. Each non-land card in your graveyard has Escape. The escape cost is equal to the card's mana cost plus exile 3 other cards from your graveyard. And then at the beginning of your end step, sacrifice Underworld Breach. This is a really cool card because, like Past in Flames, it allows you to recast the cards from your graveyard. Next, we have Underworld Dreams. This is 3 black. Whenever an opponent draws a card, Underworld Dreams deals 1 damage to that player. And then finally, we have Waste Not. Waste Not costs 1 and a black. Whenever an opponent discards a creature card, you get to create a 2/2 black zombie creature token. Whenever an opponent discards a land, you get to create 2 or add 2 black mana to your mana pool. Whenever an opponent discards a non-creature, non-land, you get to draw a card. So again, it's the opposite of the Bone Miser, because the Bone Miser only sees you, whereas Waste Not sees your opponents. You'll notice that I don't have Phyrexian Tyranny in here. I didn't have one until I opened my Double Masters 2022 box, and I am going to try and figure out a way to get it into this deck. Next, we have Planeswalkers. There's only 1 Planeswalker, and this Planeswalker is an obvious choice. We have Ob Nixilis, the Hate Twisted. His passive says... Sorry, he costs 3 and 2 black for 5 loyalty. His passive says whenever an opponent draws a card, Ob Nixilis, the Hate Twisted, deals 1 damage to that player. So again, punishing them for drawing cards. And then for -2, you can destroy target creature. Its controller draws 2 cards. I like this card for a couple reasons. Obviously, the passive in this deck is phenomenal. But I also like that it has a kill, I guess, spell. It's not a spell, but it has an ability that kills a creature. Although that is going to be kind of a last resort type of thing. Next, we're going to take a look at the non-basic lands. Starting with Blood Crypt, this is the Rakdos Shockland, so taps for red, black, counts as Swamp Mountain. Breeding Pool, Simic Shockland, so taps for green, blue, and counts as Forest Island. Got ourselves a Command Tower. Crumbling Necropolis. So this is the, is it Grixis? Yeah, Grixis tap land. Dragon Skull Summit. Check land for red-black. Drowned Catacombs, check land for blue-black. Evolving Wilds, just because I'm sure I have Fabled Passage in here somewhere. Exotic Orchard. Kind of the Felwar Stone of lands. Fabled Passage. Frontier Bivouac, this is the Temir tap land. Ketria Triome, the Temir Triome. That counts as Forest Island Mountain. Opulent Palace. This is the tribe that I can't remember. Yeah, I don't remember what these guys are. Tap land for black, green, and blue. Overgrown Tomb is the shock land for Golgari colors, so black, green. Counts as a swamp forest. Reliquary Tower, so that we don't have to worry about discarding. Rogue's Passage to help make Yidris unblockable. Rootbound Crag, check land for red, blue. Savage Lands, the Jund tap land. Steam Vents, Shockland, Is It colors for red, blue. Counts as an island and a mountain. Stomping Grounds, the Shockland for Gruul, red, green. Counts as a mountain forest. Terramorphic Expanse. Watery Grave. This is the Shockland for Dimir colors, blue, black. Counts as an island swamp. Xander's Lounge. This is the Grixis Triome. Counts as island swamp mountain. Zagoth Triome. The Triome for the tribe that I never remember, but we'll just go ahead and say Zagoth. And Ziatoro's Proving Ground. This is the Jund Triome for red, black, and green. Counts as a swamp, mountain, and forest. Lastly, we have our basic lands. We have 1, 2 forests, 1, 2, 3 islands, 1, 2, 3 mountains, and 1, 2, 3 swamps. Alright folks, that is the Yidris Wheels deck. Like I said, I wanted to preserve what I enjoyed about the Yidris Precon, which was the miniature wheel strategy that it had in it, although very inefficient. Obviously, getting the upgrades allowed me to really focus down on that concept. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions or comments, leave those down below, but let's keep it positive because I will be removing any negative comments. We just don't need those in here. And I think that's it, guys. Until next time. Peace.